We're learning the Sicha in Parshas Bamidbar, the second Sicha, Chelik Yud Ches, on page 6. In Pasik, Pekoid as B'nai Levi Gomer, Pasik says to count the Leviim, Kol Zocha mi ben Chodesh v'mayla tifkedem. Every male from the age of a month old should be counted. Shtalt sich Rashi, if ben Chodesh v'mayla. So Rashi stops on these words that they're counted from a month and up, on his Mefarish, and explains as follows. Mishayotza meklal nefalim. They're counted from this age because that's when they leave the category of nefalim, which means a baby that will not survive. And from then, hunimne, he is counted the kore sheme mishmeres hakedesh, to be called one who safeguards the charge of that which is holy. So Rashi is explaining here what this means. Why are they counted from this time? So the simple meaning of this Rashi is coming to clarify as follows. As das, was man zählt sie ben chodesh, the fact that they're counted from a month old, is es nit weil ben chodesh hatten sich a besondere chshivas. It's not because that age has some kind of significance. Al derech vi minyan b'bnei Yisrael, mi ben esrim shana gomer, like we find by Yidden that are counted from 20 years old, was serveret hayetzet tzava, because that's the age when the Yidden could enter and join the army. So there's a certain significance and importance to that age, but that's not the case over here with mi ben chodesh. Nor says blois de far was bis verta ben chodesh is men noch nit sicher as the vlad is nit ken nefel. Up until that point, we're not sure that the child will survive, that he's a healthy living baby. So therefore we wait to be sure after a month that the child is healthy. Aber be'etzem is a ben Levi roi zu gezählt werden teiche von Geburt. But really what this means is, the right time to count the Levium is immediately after birth. As Rashi says later, and the Rebbe will quote it and speak about it, that this shevet of the Levium have a history of being counted as soon as they come out of the womb, immediately when they're born. So this is the simple pshat of Rashi. However, the question over here is, bederach klal gefindt man nit as Rashi bepirushi ala teire soll sagen taimim auf mitzvahs und mekol sheken auf pratia mitzvahs. Generally speaking, we don't find Rashi that he makes it a point to give reasons for mitzvahs, and for sure not for reasons for specific details of mitzvahs. Is the full klar? If so, over here it's clear. As dort va bringt ja tam, if it's a case where Rashi gives the reason for a mitzvah or a detail of a mitzvah, is das the far was durch dem tam wird verenfet a kashe in pashtus aksuvim. He's not coming to give reasons, but he's coming to answer a question that comes up in the pshat of the pasuk. So the question here is, was the kashe da was the far bringt the Rashi time de kra? What question is Rashi addressing in the pasuk here that Rashi brings the reason for why the Levium are counted from the age of ben chodesh v'mayla? Now the question here is even stronger, because on the other hand, gefindt men in andere Erter endlich leniden die dan. We find in other places where it says similar as here. Und von deswegen sagt Rashi nit kein tam, and there Rashi doesn't comment and doesn't give any reason for this. Far unser Seder. So we find even before our Seder in Parshas Erechin, in Parshas Bechokaisai, where it speaks about the halacha of Erechin, when a person could donate a certain value of different ages to the Beis HaMikdash. So state there it says that if you donate the value of someone that's the age of a chodesh old, so then the value is so and so. Und Rashi is dort nit mevaya the time for was apoches mit ben chodesh hat nit kein erech. And Rashi there does not say why the youngest age of value that you donate is only from a month and higher and not before. Al derech zeh beim tzivui, similar later. There's the mitzvah of shoir, or actually it's before in Parshas Emor. The mitzvah of shoir, kesav geime miyem ashmini v'halei yiratzel carbon, that only after the behema is 8 days old could it be brought as a carbon. Why do you have to wait until 8 days? Is Rashi nit mevayef havas mit avarten bis yom ashmini? He doesn't explain the reason of the waiting until 8 days. Chach in Targum Yenison steht tam the yishmeide de leinafel. In Targum Yenison it says that the reason is similar to what Rashi says here, that it should be known that this behema is not going to die, that it's a healthy animal. But nevertheless, Rashi doesn't quote it over there. Hind, if so, the question here is, why here is Rashi giving the reason for this age that the Levium are counted only from a month and higher? Achmeres Tamua, the question on Rashi here is even stronger. Tamua is, das was Rashi is Meisif, Mishayatza Meklal Nefalim. After Rashi explains that this is the age when the child is healthy, Hu Nimne Likare Shaimer Mishmeres HaKodesh. He's now counted to be included in being a Shaimer Mishmeres HaKodesh. Why is Rashi adding this? Aleph, so there's a few questions on this. Da will me mazbe sein, for was metzelt Shevet Levi mi ben Chodesh v'mayla. Seemingly the only focus of Rashi is to explain this age, why from a month and higher. Is vasadon egeya, as their minion is, likare sheme mishmeres HaKodesh. What is the point of telling us what the job of the Leviim will later be, that he's included in being the ones that are going to guard, safeguard the Beis HaMikdash? Why is that relevant? Nachme, the question is even stronger. Später im Parsha, by Minyan HaBechayres steht euch. Later, when it speaks about counting the Bechayres, so it says, Pekoid Gaimer vi ben Chodesh v'mayla Gaimer. They're also counted from the same age, from a month and higher. But das ist doch nicht likare sheme mishmeres HaKodesh. And definitely by the Bechayres, the reason is not because of their job to safeguard the Beis HaMikdash. It's Bechayres, that's not their job at all. Klalas Hatam is the Zelbe. And generally speaking, the reason why the Bechayres are counted, and they're counted from this age of a month and higher, is the same like it says there by the Leviim. The Rashi Taich, as Rashi there clearly says, Mishiyatza Meklal Sofik Nefalim. That's the age when you're out of the doubt of being a Nefel. So why does Rashi have to add over here this detail of Shayim Mishmeres HaKodesh regarding the Leviim if it's irrelevant? Euch is Rashi nit meisiv dort an andere Kavane von the Minyan. So Rashi there says the same as here in the beginning, that it's about the making sure that the child is not a neifel, and Rashi doesn't add any other reason in addition like he does here. Beis, another question here is, was is da Rashi mechadish? What is Rashi here letting us know that we wouldn't know otherwise? Es steht doch schon beferisch in the friedige Psukim, as in Yonif and Shevet Levi is, v'shomres mishmarte geimel lavades avedes ha-mishkan. It's clear in the pasuk what the job of the Leviim is, to safeguard the Mishkan and so on. Gimel, another question is, Oib, Mishumeze Tam, darf Rashi sagen da, in was besteht die Aveda von Shevet Levi? For whatever reason, Rashi finds it necessary to tell us what the Aveda of the Leviim is. Was ist Mishane von dem Loschen vom friedigen Passakanal und sagt, Sheme Mishmeres HaKodesh. Why is Rashi changing the Loschen that it says in the previous pasuk where it says V'shamres Mishmartai, Laved, and they serve in the Mishkan, and instead Rashi brings the expression of Shemer Mishmeres HaKodesh. They safeguard the charge of holiness. Was ist von a spätedigen pasuk? Rashi is quoting here from a later pasuk which we didn't even learn yet. The Tmiyah is noch größer, the question is even stronger. Der letzte pasuk steht nur bei the Bnei Kahas und nicht bei Klalas HaLeviim. The expression that Rashi chooses is not even written regarding the entire Leviim, all of the Shevet Levi. It's written specifically regarding Bnei Kahas, and for some reason that's the expression that it says by Kahas that Rashi chooses to quote here to describe what the Leviim do. Now, even though as in Pasig, when it talks about the leader of the Leviim, the leader that's above everyone, and over there it uses the term Shemre Mishmeres HaKodesh, similar to what Rashi says here. And who is that talking about? So Taich to Rashi says, Valmahi Nisi Yusai, regarding what is this leadership? Kudas Shemre Mishmeres HaKodesh al Yodei Hoya Pekudas Kulam. That he took charge of everybody. So this is the pasuk that's speaking about all the Leviim, as the gate of all Leviim. Is aber als nicht move on. However, the question still remains: Was schreibt Rashi da loschen von a pasuk? Was steht beiker bei Bnei Kahas? Rashi quotes specifically this loschen of Shemrei Mishmeres HaKodesh that the Torah singles out Bnei Kahas with this expression. Be'ez hat gekent bringen kamal l'shaynes verstehen by alle Leviim. The Torah repeats this expression of the Shemrim, of the Aveda of the Leviim more than once regarding all the Leviim. So why wouldn't Rashi bring the more general lashon that it usually uses regarding the Leviim, and not this specific lashon of Shemrim Mishmeres HaKodesh? Daled, the final question on this pshat of Rashi here is in friedigem pasuk. Velacheret euch wegen der Anderskeit von Minyan Shevet Levi in the pasuk right before the one we're discussing, where it speaks about what was unique about the Leviim. So it says, Achas mata Levi loy sifkei geimer. The Leviim are not to be counted together with the rest of Klal Yisrael. Shreit Rashi. Rashi himself over there says the reason. That Tam, and the reason here is, Kedai hu ligyon shomelech liyos nimna levadai. It's befitting for the legion of the king to be counted separately. This is actually earlier in the end of Kapitel Aleph in this week's parsha. So Rashi brings the reason why the Leviim stand out. They are Ligyon Shemelech. Und da is Rashi Mishana, and Rashi here brings a different point. Und sagt, Sheime Mishmeres HaKedesh, that they're counted from a younger age, separate from the rest of Klal Yisrael, which is only counted from the age of 20 and above. And here it's a new point. What's special about the Leviim is that they're Sheimrei Mishmeres HaKedesh. Unit Nimnem Beligyon Shemelech. And Rashi does not bring the point of them being separate and counted differently because they're part of the legion of the king. So what changed from what Rashi said already before to what Rashi says here now? Der Hechrech von Rashi zum Mevai sein, Mishayotza, Meklal Nefalim. So going back to the first basic question that the Rebbe asked here, why is Rashi Bechlal giving a reason for the detail of this mitzvah, as it doesn't usually do? So the reason for Rashi to have to say this would be as follows. What we could seemingly say that Sivoi Pekoides B'nei Levi, when it talks about counting the Leviim, Kumt doch behemshech zum Dibur Hashem, it's following up what it said before, Va'ani Hine lakachti es Leviim mitoich b'nei Yisrael tachas kol b'chayr, that the Leviim serve in the Beis HaMikdash instead in the place of the b'chayrim. V'hayu li Leviim, and therefore the Leviim are dedicated to me. Ki li kol b'chayr b'yom ha'kaisti kol b'chayr b'eretz Mitzrayim. The b'chayrim belong to the Eibishter because he saved them when Makas B'chayris was there and he killed all the b'chayrim. So the Leviim are taking the place of the b'chayrim and therefore they belong to the Eibishter. That's the context of the pasuk right before here. So now, if the Leviim belong to the Eibishter, is das Tachas kol b'chayr? It's instead of the b'chayrim. Was in dem gehen herein alle b'chayris. This includes all the b'chayris. Afile divas farben chaydish. Even a b'chayr that was just born. As Zayvi keisa b'kab'chayr b'mitzrayim sheb'pasik. Just like it was when the Eibishter brought Makas b'chayris in Eretz Mitzrayim in the pasuk. Zene gemeint alle b'chayris. Makas b'chayris affected all the b'chayris, even a baby that was just born. So if the Leviim are taking the place of the B'chayres, so this mitzvah should have been, so they belong to the Eibishter instead of the B'chayres, and alle Leviim, as his own Zainli, should have included all the Leviim, that they all, even the youngest, even the baby that's just born, should belong to the Eibishter. Even younger than a month old. That's the question, looking at the context of the pasuk, what the mitzvah is about, which the pasuk itself says. The Rebbe was Rashi Masbezain, so therefore Rashi explains, as be'emes vot megezählt the b'nei Levi min habeten. That really, yes, the point here is that we are counting b'nei Levi from birth. However, in order to be sure that they could take the place of a b'chayr, we're waiting until the Levi leaves the category of being a nefel. That's what Rashi is coming to clarify. But if this is the Pshat Rashi al pizeh, as the tzivui pekoides b'nei Levi kom behemshech tzuvani hine lakachti es Leviim tachas kol b'chayr, to the fact that the counting of the Leviim is for them to take the place of a b'chayr, vert erst shver. So now this intensifies the other questions that we asked before. Was Rashi zokt atam v'chshivis im b'nei Levi mitzad atzmam. Of them was mitzelt zei mi ben chaydish. It seems like Rashi is focusing and telling us a new separate reason regarding the B'nai Levi, why they are counted only mi ben chaydish. So it actually makes our question even stronger. Aleph, and the question number one here is as follows. V'bal de Leviim, zen and tachas kol b'chayr mi b'nei Yisrael. They're only taking the place of the b'chayris of Yidden, on kedel kamon beparsha, as it will say later, the b'chayris hat me gedarft zählen, peide sein zei mit Leviim, no mi ben chaydish v'mayla. At what age were the b'chayris counted? They were only counted from a month old. As Rebbe quoted before, Rashi says that by b'chayris the reason is because they should be yotzam meklal safek nefelim, so they're also only counted from a month and up. Kum tachais, if so, it should come out as bederach memela. Hat ben euch the Leviim tachas kol b'chayr gedaft zeilen, no, bi ben chaydish v'mayla. So if the Leviim are taking the place of the b'chayris, so it's obvious that it should be the same age. They should take their place also only from Iben Chaydish V'mayla. Younger than Iben Chaydish, they don't have to take a place of a B'chayr, which is younger than Ben Chaydish, because he's not even counted yet. At the age of Ben Chaydish, B'derech Mameli, he has to take the place of a B'chayr. So Rashi doesn't have to say anything over here. It's self-understood that the Levi is being counted at the same age as the B'chayris. So, if so, for was lernt Rashi dem tam of ben chaydish by Leviim? Why does Rashi here quote and explain the reason by the Leviim? Val demolt yotza der Levi meklal nefolim. That the point is that we have to be sure by this Levi that he's not al nefel, that he's a healthy baby. There's a reason over here that he can't be counted. He is not yet. We're not sure that he's going to be healthy to take the place, and therefore this is the only time that he could be counted. Und nicht, wie es lernen Tage, kamen Mefarshei HaTeire, and not, as many Mefarshim actually say, genommen von Bamidbar Rabbe, weil die Leviim sind a Pidyon von die Bechiris, und Minyan HaBechiris, is mit Ben Chaydish von Maila. Why doesn't Rashi simply keep it, as it would seem from the simple pshat of the Pasuk, that if the Bechiris are counted with Ben Chaydish von Maila, so then the Leviim don't have to be counted before that. It's not necessary for them to take the place of the Bechayris before then. It doesn't make a difference what the reason is. It doesn't make a difference if it's because then you know sure that they're going to be a Nefil or not be a Nefil, even if theoretically you would be 100% sure that a Levi will not be a Nefil, even if he's before me Ben Chodesh V'mayla. As it actually is in most cases, that a baby survives, even if you count him before, he'll live later. But it doesn't matter. You only count him ben chodesh v'mayla because he's coming to take the place of the bechayres, and the bechayres were only counted ben chodesh v'mayla for whatever reason. So why is it necessary for Rashi to say here separately regarding the bechayres that the age is mi ben chodesh v'mayla to be sure that he's yatsa meklal nefalim? The Rebbe in Order 19 says, what would have happened if you would count a Levi before mi ben chodesh v'mayla? So if the reason is, like Rashi says over here, to be sure that he's not a nefil, so then if it turns out later that he did survive and he wasn't a nefil, so b'di'evet that count would be good. But that's based on what Rashi actually says. But if Rashi would leave it in the simple pshat of the pasuk, that this age, mi ben chodesh v'mayla, it must be at that age. Before that age, there's no point in counting, because it's coming to correspond to the age of the bechayres. So if you b'di'evet counted before, that count wouldn't help. That count they wouldn't be included b'chlal. You would have to count over later to see that it should be from that age. So Rashi here is switching from the simple pshat of the pasuk. Emes take, so it's true as minyan ha-bechayres, mi ben chodesh v'mayla. This age is to leave them tam vas yatsa meklal safek nefalim. Originally, by the bechayres, the reason is in order that we should know that it's not a nefil. Kipirish Rashi sham, as Rashi there says, the kanal siv beis. Aber al pi anal is by Bnei Levi nit oster tam. Here by the Bnei Levi, that's not the reason, to be sure that the baby is healthy. The reason is because simply this is the age by the Bechayris. So there's no point in counting the Levi before. He's coming to stand in the place of the Bechayris only Ben Chodesh V'mayla. So there is no point in counting before. Rashi, it's not necessary to bring this reason of Yatsa Meklal Nefalim here. That's one question. Al Beis, another question here is, Al Pizeh vet noch schwerer, was Rashi sagt, Mish Yatsa Meklal Nefalim, hu nimne likare shoyme mishmeres HaKodesh. The whole addition of Rashi, that the point of the counting is that at that point he's counted to be part of shoyme mishmeres HaKodesh. Why is Rashi bringing this here? L'chayre is der tam a minyan mishayatza chulu nit nor likare shoyme mishmeres HaKodesh. The reason is not only to be part of the shoyme mishmeres HaKodesh, not oich tzalib Pidyon ha-bechayres. The main point is to be as a redemption for the bechayres. V'adarabah, their time is mefurish, shpeter and parsha. That's the reason that the Torah clearly later explains why the Leviim are being counted. So why does Rashi not stick to the simple pshat of the pasuk, and he brings up new details that are totally not necessary? Now we go on to the next part of Rashi. Weiter is Rashi mamshech. Rashi continues and says, Rav Yehuda bar Abshalom said, Lamud hu oisei ha-shevet. This shevet of Levi has a history, lies nimnem in a beten, of being counted from the belly. Shenemar, pasuk says, Yolda oisa Levi b'Mitzrayim, that Levi gave birth to her in Mitzrayim, referring to Yechevet. Im knisasa b'Pesach Mitzrayim, upon her entry into the portal of Mitzrayim. Yolda Oisa, so Levi's wife, gave birth to Yechevet. V'nimnis b'shivim nefesh, and yet she was still counted amongst the 70 nefesh, the 70 souls that came down to Mitzrayim. How do we know? For when you count up the total of all the people that is mentioned in the pasuk there, you find that there was 70 minus 1. So they were missing. So Yecheved was the 70th one. Vihi hishlima es haminyan, and she completed the count of 70, and therefore, even though she was born at the entry, at the Pesach of Mitzrayim, but she was counted immediately from when she was born to be mashlim the number to 70. So here we see that this Shevet has a history of being counted immediately from birth. So here the Rebbe has many questions on this part of Rashi. Euch does not move on. So here we have the following questions. Aleph, number one, wie gerät frie is Rashi nicht mefarisch taime de kra, seiden es wird durch dem verämpft akashi im pshuta shel mikra. Rashi does not explain reasons for a mitzvah or a detail in the pasuk unless there's a certain question that is coming to address. So why is Rashi bringing this whole story about the fact that the Levium have a history of being counted from the birth? Another question here is, der Ben Chamish lemikra darf nicht ankommen zu lamadu chulu. The Ben Chamish, a child learning the pasuk here, doesn't need you to bring him from this history of the Levium. Weil hat schon früher gelernt, ach, es mate Levi loy sifkoid besoich b'nei Yisrael. He already learned before, where the Eibishter says, don't count the Levium together with Yidden. Und Rashi teach dort, kedayu ligin shom melech li is nimne levadai, that the Levium are deserving to be counted separately. They're a ligyon, they're a legion of the king. And then Rashi says, another pshat, dova acher, tzafa kadosh baruch hu ala kol hanimnim mi ben esrim shana v'mayla. The Eibishter saw that those counted from 20 and up will be part of the gzeira that happened after Chet Egel and so on. And therefore, Amar al yiu elu b'chlal. So the Eibishter says the Levium should not be included in that count. Was from beide Pirushim is muvan. From both of those pshatim of Rashi, it's understood as zayindik, ligya in Shomelech, being that they are the legion of the king, oisgetelt von alle Yidden, different from rest of Yidden, is a minyan nit doimet zu minyan b'nei Yisrael. So we understand from this that the way they're counted, from the age from which they are counted, is different than the rest of Yidden. It's not necessary to bring back the whole history where we find by Yecheved that they are counted mina beten, that they're counted from birth. We see already that the Eibishter says before clearly that they're not going to be counted from age 20, they're counted from earlier because they're more important, they're special. Gimel, on the other hand, there's a question here, Le'idach, was is the raya from Yecheved linyanenu? What kind of proof is there from Yecheved being counted there to our case? Dot Zeltman kol zochar. Here, who are we counting? We're counting the males. In order to be called part of those that take charge in the Beis Hamikdash. Mashenkein dort hat man gezählt shivim nefesh. There all souls, Zcharim and Akevis are all counted. Und kedei, this says nefesh. Und kedei zu wissen haboim mitzrayim. And there it's for a completely different purpose. Just to know who comes to Mitzrayim. It doesn't seem like that we're counting specifically the Levium that stand out in any way. It's just part of the Shivim Nefesh. So what's the connection, Machlal? It seems to be a completely different story. Oich zenen da kama v'kama diyukim in Lashon Rashi. Also, if you pay attention to the language of Rashi, there are many things that we can notice here that are unusual. The Rebbe will point out every specific detail in Rashi is 100% precise. Aleph, number one, Rashi says, Nimne mina beten. They're counted from the belly. B'shinoi from the makir, der memre shel Rab Yehuda b'Rab Shalom, in Tanchume, Bamidbar Rabba, v'oid, different than what it says in all of these medrashim, vu the lashon is, at shehem ketanim, that they're counted even when they're very young. So why does Rashi use a different expression? Afilim is lozagan as Rashi is mishaned dem loshen, and even if we'll say that Rashi is switching this language to madgejain, as das meint afil ketanim is an erst geboren geworden. Farmi ben chodesh v'mayla. Ketanim doesn't exactly make the point that it's literally from birth. So Rashi is using an expression, so you should know that it's from birth. Was the mit is euch move on, was Rashi is meisif, Rashi adds another thing that does not say in the Medrash, Shenema sheyolda isa lelevi b'Mitzrayim, im knisasa b'Pesach Mitzrayim yolda isa, right when they entered into Mitzrayim she was born, Chotsch, das wird nicht gebracht b'divrei Rab Yehuda b'Rab Shalom, wie sie stehen im Medrash. It's not brought in the Medrash this way. Weil, will madgejain, das ist teichef mishanoina. Rashi wants to emphasize that it's literally from the moment she's born that she's counted. So that would explain the difference. But the question still remains, is mer masan dem loshen mishanoilat? Why wouldn't Rashi use the simple and direct language, mishanoilat, from birth? Was patzeichent dem ben Levi amoni, which refers to the actual baby, the ben Levi, which is born. Onit mina beten imoi. The term beten refers to the mother. The mother's womb, the mother. Why are we saying a language which makes some implication about where he comes from the mother that gave birth to him? Beis, another thing to notice in Rashi's Lashon. The Lashon HaGemara on Bekame Medrashim is Leidasa ben Achaimis. When it speaks about Yecheved's birth, it says she was born between the walls entering in Mitzrayim. Favos schreibt Rashi Knisasa bePesach Mitzrayim. Why does Rashi use a different expression, saying that she was born at the portal of Mitzrayim? A different expression that Rashi chooses. Gimel, another thing. Was is Rashi medayik b'l'shoyne Knisasa bePesach Mitzrayim? Why does he use this term Pesach, the portal or the entry of Mitzrayim? Unitztam Knisasa leMitzrayim, coming into Mitzrayim. What's that extra word? Daled, another question. Favos bringt Rashi der Reihe, as mod gezählt Yecheved ben Abam Mitzrayim, von dem was nimnis b'shivim nafesh. The proof is from the fact that we see that she's counted amongst the 70. The Raya is doch schon da von a friedigen Pasuk. The fact that she must have been counted as well is proven from an earlier Pasuk, where it says, Eile ben Leah goyme kol nefesh goyme shloishim v'shalish. There are 33 from the children of Leah. On Bepratan, and there Rashi says that if you actually look at each one, yet the Meitzeh Lamed Beis, there's only 32. Hat Rashi gedav bringen the Raya von dort. So why doesn't Rashi bring the Raya, the proof from this pasuk that it says earlier? Why does he bring the Raya from a later pasuk where it uses the term shivim nefesh? Hagam as azeh wird es gebracht in the Mebre von Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom. So even though this is the way it's said in the statement of Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom, is Aleph hagufa kasher. So that itself has to be understood. Why did he prove it from a later pasuk and not an earlier pasuk? Beis. Another point, Vigeret Kama Pomim is nit Yonish Rashi, it's herabringen in sein Pirish Drashis Razal. Rashi's point is never in just quoting a drasha of Razal as is. Seiden, das ist Shaykh zu Pshutishal Mikra, unless it's relevant for the Pshat of the Pasuk. Hat Rashi gedav bringen nit die Memre von Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom, not the Raya from Friedigen Pasuk. So Rashi should quote the Raya from an earlier Pasuk that proves this point. In other places in Razal we find, and as Rashi quoted before, they bring the raya from the fact that it says Shleishim v'Shalish and it was only 32. Hey, another diak here is Favos Klaiptois Rashi the Girse von Tanchuma. Why does Rashi choose the version that says in Tanchuma as Leitimtzaim al Shivim Chosarachas? That is only 70 minus 1. Und nicht wie die Gerste Ktsarim bei Bamidbar Rabba, not a shorter and more direct version that it says in Midbar Rabba, Harei Samech Tes, that is only 69. Vav, another diak, Favos is Rashi Kaifel B'siyim Pirushai. Why does Rashi seemingly repeat again and say, V'hi Hishlima Saminyan, she completed the count. Nachdem, wie hat schon früher gesagt, V'nimnis B'shivim Nafesh. Rashi begins saying that she was counted as part of the 70. Without her, you had no 70. Befrat, as the Esafe is niton medrash. This is Rashi adding it. In the medrash, it's not there. Zayin, another question here is, Favos is Rashi maitik oich Hashem bala memre Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom. Why does Rashi bring the name of the one that said this drasha? Was das tute, wie schon gerät kam upon nor l'shem teisves biur in sein pirish. Rashi only quotes a name if it's relevant and it gives an added explanation to the pshat that he brings. The Rebbe continues and focuses more on the yukim that he said in this Rashi. Der Pele in the Oiben de Monte the yukim vet noch greser. The wonder of how Rashi presents this count of Yecheved becomes even greater when you take a look the way it's brought in Rashi originally in Parshas Vayigash. Rashi hat schon herabgebracht in Parshas Vayigash demselben Inyan. Rashi there quotes the same subject as Yecheved ver gezählt b'minyan hanefesh haba Mitzrayim, that she's counted amongst all people that came to Mitzrayim. But if you look there, what you'll notice is as follows. Aleph stellt sich Rashi and bringt den Maimer as Aleph in Pasuk Eile b'nei Leah goyme kol nefesh shloishim v'shalish. Rashi stops and points this out the first time. Shloishim v'shalish, where it says 33 and it's only 32. Beis azokte beprotani atamoitze ela lamed beis. He says that you only find 32 unit lamed gimel chasa achas. He doesn't use a similar expression as he says here, 33 minus 1. Gimel azokt ela zu yechevet shenilde bein achaimis b'knisas leir. He uses the expression bein achaimis, which is the lashon that Chazal usually use, and not, as Rashi says here, bepesach Mitzrayim. And Dalid is nit kaifel tzimsaf v'hi hishlima saminyan. He does not repeat again like he does here. She completed the count. Hey, bringt nit arab dem Shem bala memre. There, the drasha, which the name there is Rab Chame bar Rab Chanina, he does not bring down the name. Funu bepratani atamaytze ala lamed beis, the one that said that this drasha that you only find 32, he just says it without a name. So we see that the fact that Rashi changes in all of these details here, it must be for a reason. The Pele is noch greser, the one that's even greater. Oich in Parshas Pinchas. There's another place where Rashi brings this inyan. Oich from Pasuk Asher Yolda Isa Levi b'Mitzrayim bringt Rashi as Yecheved is given in the minion from Shivim Nafesh that she was part of the 70. Now Dod Zokte Bekitzer, and there Rashi writes very concisely, Kishenichnesu l'Techa Chayme, when they entered into the wall, Yoldasa, she was born, or she gave birth to her, V'hi Shlima Minyan Shivim, and she completed the number 70. Because if you count, you'll only find 69. Much clearer, concise, straight to the point. So even if Rashi, for whatever reason, has to prove it from the pasuk where it mentions the number 70, why wouldn't he write the same as Rashi himself wrote in Parshas Pinchas? Which is very similar to the language the Gemara in Baba Basra says. Aleph, much more direct, you only find 69. Nit, shivim chaser achas, not 70 minus 1. Beis, nit kaifel sein v'nimnis b'shivim nafesh, and v'hi shlimis aminyan. It's not necessary to repeat this twice. Gimel, nit brengen dem shem bala memra. It's not necessary to bring the name of the one that said this statement here. So we have all these questions here in Rashi, many questions. I lost count a long time ago. But the Rebbe here is asking a more general question that this entire Rashi seems to be extra. The flow of the simple pshat of the pasuk of why the Levium are counted and that they're taking the place of the Bechayris, and therefore we know why it's at the age of a month and higher is simply understood from the pasuk. It's not necessary for Rashi to say anything. And then all the details that we see that Rashi here says, Shemre Mishmeres HaKadosh, and the comparison to Yecheved, and the way Rashi quotes what happened by Yecheved, all of these details, the way Rashi says it, is something unique. There's a certain point that Rashi is trying to make here. What is that? The explanation of all of this is as follows. Wie gesagt früher, Siv Gimel, as we quoted before, kommt der Pasuk behemshech zu va'ani hine lekachti Leviim mitoich bnei Yisrael v'hayu li Leviim. The Eibishter says, I've taken the Leviim for me instead of the Bechayris, and the Leviim will be to serve me. So what does Rashi explain over there? Is Rashi dart mefarish? So there, Rashi explains, when it says mitoich bnei Yisrael, what does this mean? Sheyiyu Yisrael seichrin oisan l'shirus shali, that the Yidden hire the Leviim to serve me. Since the Aveda before this was given to the Bechayres, and the Leviim were chosen instead of the Bechayres, and the Yidden are hiring them to serve the Eibishter. So what do we see from that Rashi? Rashi learned as lakachti es Leviim tachas kol Bechayr goyim, and when it says that the Leviim are taken here instead of the Bechayr, meint das nit dem Inyan was Leviim zenen poide de Bechayres. We're not referring to what it's going to speak about later in the Parsha, that the Leviim are here to redeem the Bechayres. Wie es lernen andere Mefarshim, as other Mefarshim say. Weil der Zivi of dem Pidyon is gekommen erst später, nach in Minyan Leviim. This command that they will be a redemption for the Bechayres, that comes later in the Parsha. It hasn't been mentioned yet. Nor, das ist an Inyan b'fnei atzmai. Over here, this is a separate point. Der Eibishter hat Beiche gewähnt bei Leviim, tachas kol Bechayr. The Eibishter chooses the Leviim to serve instead of each Bechayr. Sheyiu Yisrael seichrin oisan l'shirish shali, that the Yidden should hire the Leviim to be in this position instead of the Bechayris to serve the Eibishter. But it doesn't talk over here about the fact that the Leviim have to redeem the Bechayris. That comes later. Can Shein Rashi nit lernen? If so, Rashi cannot explain here, as other Mefarshim do, as the time from Minyan Levim ben Chodesh v'mayla, that the reason for why the Levim are only counted from the age of a month and up is weil in Yana is b'chdei tzupaydes and the b'chaydes mi ben Chodesh v'mayla. Since it's only coming to redeem the b'chaydes from this age, mi ben Chodesh v'mayla. That's not the point here. Weil of them is been angesagt geworden und das ist nischadisch geworden erst später. This was commanded and only brought as a new thing later on in the parsha. At this point, all it says is that the Eibishter chooses the Leviim instead of the Bechayres. But the fact that they have to serve as a redemption to redeem the Bechayres from this position, that doesn't say yet. So therefore, Rashi has to explain this age and give a different reason for this age. And here comes the question that Rashi has, as the Rebbe will now explain. Does the meaning of Levim come be'emshach to the psukim v'sreden wegen avodas haLevim? So now we understand that they are being counted as the special ones that are being chosen and hired to serve in the Beis HaMikdash or in the Mishkan. Is mistavet zu sagen, so it would be logical to say, as the minyan is verbunden mit zeir avodah, that they're being counted specifically in connection with the service that they're going to be serving in the Beis HaMikdash. Is doch tamua? If so, the question here is, avodas haLevim hoypt zich erst dam ben shloishim geimer. From what age do they begin serving? From 30 years old. So their count should also be from that age of 30. So why are they being counted from the age of 1 month old if the point of them being counted here is the fact that they were chosen to serve in the Beis HaMikdash? How could they serve at that age? That's the question that Rashi is coming to address. He's not simply coming to explain the reason of the mitzvah, but it seems to be there's a discrepancy over here. Their age of serving is from 30 years old, and their age of being counted, which is for the purpose of serving, is from 30 days old. What's going on? The Rebbe was Rashi Meisev Zayin, so therefore Rashi adds and explains Nimne likare Sheme Mishmeres HaKodesh, that they are counted to be called part of the ones that are taking charge in the Beis HaMikdash. Oicha ben Chodesh v'mayla, that even a Levi, from the age of a month old, hotashayches to Avedas b'nei Levi, already has a connection to the Aveda of the Leviim, while from them on, from that age, Hagam tutnit ken Aveda, although he's not yet doing an Aveda, veter angerufen likare Sheme Mishmeres HaKodesh. He already could be referred to, the name of Sheme Mishmeres HaKodesh already applies to him from that age on. That's the chiddush of this Rashi, and therefore, yes, he's being counted in connection to his Aveda in the Mishkan, and that name and that title does start at the age of 30 days old. That's the point, the main point here that the Rebbe explains in this Rashi, which is the basis of the whole continuation of the Rebbe's explanation. The counting of the Leviim is because they're serving in the Mishkan. The age of 30 days old is actually the appropriate age that they can have that title of being the ones that are serving in the Mishkan. That's the huge chiddush of this Rashi. But if so, the question here is, the fact that Shevet Levi is counted separately, the fact that they're counted from this age of a month old, because they're more important, they're a legion of the king, so they're counted at a younger age. So they're different than the rest of the Shvatim. Soll bei sie sein der Meile, als Schäume ben Chodesh und Meile sollen sie gerufen werden Schäumer, teuer am Meiral Pe'ule loschen Heuve Mishmeres HaKodesh. But this point that we see in the context of the psukim here, that from the age of 30 days old, they already have the title as being currently, in the present, a Schäumer, serving and guarding and taking charge in the Beis HaMikdash, or in the Mishkan. How can we say that it starts at this young age? That's the question that Rashi has to continue and explain here. So that's why Rashi cannot just simply say that at that age they're already called Sheme Mishmeres HaKodesh. How do we understand this? If then bringt Rashi, Omer Rabbi Yehuda ber Sholem, Lama du Oisa Shevet, he explains that this Shevet has a history of being counted from birth. Und teicht gleich Ois, as nit nur hat man Yechevet gezählt, and Rashi here is explaining that not only was Yechevet counted then, nor he is a rein in the mispar from Shivim Nefesh. The main point that Rashi is trying to say here is not only that she was counted from such a young age, but at that young age, she's the one that completes the number 70. Und nachmer, sie hat Maschlem gewend zum Minyan. She brings it to the completion. This young little girl brings the entire Klal Yisrael at that point to the completion of the number 70. Was der Dio geht zu verstehen, Oicha ben Chomesh, so this point here explains even for a child that's learning the Pasuk, as das was the Pasuk is madgish, dem mispar nefashos lebeis Yaakov abba mitzrayim shivim. The Pasuk tells us that the number was 70. Is done them ashlemus. This number 70 is not just a random number, but this is a certain complete number. Shivim weist auf a ganze Shleimus. It refers to the Shleimus of Klal Yisrael at that point. Klolus von dem ganzen jüdischen Volk, the entire Jewish nation. Und Yechevet hat Maschlim gewähnt at der Minyan. She's the one that completes this number. Das says, sie hat aufgetan a Shleimus in ganzen Beis Yaakov. This one little girl brings about the completion of all of Yidden. Ze sollen zukommen zu werden b'mispar shivim, to come to be completed the number 70. That's the main point that Rashi is coming to say, not simply to show us that the Shevet has a history of being counted at a young age. That's not necessarily similar to the count over here that Rebbe pointed out earlier in the questions of the Sikha, that the point of the counting there and the pointing of the counting here is different. But what we're using the counting for, that her count, her number, could be used to be mashlim all of Klal Yisrael even at such a young age. And that from that Rashi teaches us, und wie bald das Lamud hu oisei hashevet. As bald beim Geburt haben sie bekoyach zu peulen Shleimus in ganzen Beis Yaakov, that she's being counted, and she as an individual at such a young age could bring a Shleimus to all of Klal Yisrael. The far kem ze tzeilen Shoimi ben Chodesh. Similar, we could say over here regarding the Leviim, that already from a month old they could be counted. Und ze euch anrufen Shoime mishmeres hakodesh, and they already have that title of that Shleimus of who they're going to be later, which is to serve in the base in the Mishkan. Atafkid was Negeya ala Yidin. This job, which is relevant and important for all of Klal Yisrael, Kolosh Rashi Anal, Sheyu Yisrael Seichrin Eisen Chulu, that the Yidin hired the Leviim to do this job, to take charge in the Mishkan. So like we find by Yecheved, at a young age, she's mashlim all of Klal Yisrael, so to the Leviim, at this very young age of a month old, can take charge, can have this title that they're taking charge and are helping all of Klal Yisrael. So with this we understand, Aleph, was Rashi bringt die Reihe von Shivim und nicht von Shleishim v'Shalish. So why Rashi brings the Reihe specifically from the number 70 and not from 33, because Rashi is not simply trying to prove to you that she was counted at a young age, but Rashi is trying to prove to you that at this young age she could be mashlim this number of 70. And Beis, the other point was a chazet iber v'hi hishlima es aminyan. The point is not just that she was counted, but that she brings the count to its completion. And that's the proof to what it's saying over here, that at a very young age, the Leviim could be the ones that are as if they're already hired and they have this title to do this job, to be mashlim for all of Klal Yisrael. Beim Ben Chomesh Lemikra, however, by a child learning this, Akolpanim Atalmud Memulach, a sharp student that will analyze this deeper, he'll have a question. Is aber nit glattik, he'll have the following question. The fact is, until the age of 30 years old, he's still not doing this job. It seems to only be a title. It's a title that this baby gets at 30 days old, that he is a Shoime Mishmeres HaKodesh. But it's not more than a title in that point. So what's the point of this title? The Rebbe is Rashi Maitik, Oich the Namen von Bala Memre, Rab Yehuda Rab Sholem. So therefore Rashi quotes the name of the one that said this, Rabbi Yehuda Rab Sholem, was Gate L'Shitasai as Kriyas Shem Alein is an Inyan, where we see that he said that just a title in itself has a significance. Where do we see this? The Yerushalmi asks the following question. There's a contradiction in the Psukim regarding the length of David HaMelech's kingdom. Ksiv in one pasuk it says, "Vayamim Hashem Malach David al Kol Yisrael Arbaim Shana," that David HaMelech was a king for 40 years. Uksiv, in another pasuk it says, "Bechevrain Malach Yehuda Sheva Shanim v'Shishim Chadashim u'B'Yerushalayim Malach Shleishim v'Shalish Shana Gomer." So here it says that he was a king for 40 years and 6 months. As B'Poyel is Malach Mem Shana mit Zeks Chadashim. He was a king for 40 years and additional 6 months. Brengt of them Kametirutzim, and Rashi brings a few answers to this. The Yerushalmi brings a few answers to this question, the contradiction regarding the Melucha of David HaMelech. Danach brengt and then he brings the answer of Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Sholem. Omer Rab Yudim bar Rab Sholem. Ksiv, the pasuk says, Kisheishes Chadashim Yoshav Sham Yoav. There was 6 months that Yoav was there. V'chol Yisrael. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Eibishter says to David HaMelech, Ani amarti lecha al tizgaru bam. I told you, do not bother the people of Ammon and Moav. Ubikashto lizgaras bam. You were planning together with Yoav in those 6 months to fight with Moav. Chayecha she'enon nimnun lach. I promise you that in the time of your kingdom, those 6 months will not be counted. So he actually served as a king for 6 months, but when the pasuk speaks about it in one place, it doesn't count it. It doesn't give him the title king for those 6 months. Zetman the fun shitase von Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Sholem. So what do we see over here? What's Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Sholem saying? As das was the Teire ruft dem nit an b'shem melech b'meshech shisha chadashim. Just the fact that he didn't have the title in the pasuk as a king for those 6 months, is das allein shein einish. That itself is a punishment for David HaMelech. Chach euch demelt hat leut der Schitte gehat adin von HaMelech. He continued being a king in that time, but just the fact that he doesn't have the title king in the pasuk, that's a punishment. So we see that a title in the pasuk matters. So how much more so is this true in the positive? As das allein was meruf to Levim sheime mishmeres hakedesh. The fact that from the young age of a 30 days old baby, the child is called sheime mishmeres hakedesh is shein an inyan shal ma'ila v'chshivus. That's already something of significance. That's important, and therefore that's what the pasuk here is saying, that the Levim at that point have at least the title of being called sheime mishmeres hakedesh. Es bleibt noch a beschwer. However, the questions still remain over here. This is not fully understood. Naisef of the Diyukim, the Leil Sifei, in addition to some of the questions that we asked before that were not answered yet. Aleph nimnem in a beten. Why does Rashi use this term of beten? Beis knisasa bepesach mitzrayim. Why does Rashi use the term of Pesach? And Gimel shivim chaser achas. Why does Rashi use the term of 70 minus 1? But in addition, Favos bringt Rashi dafke di meile von Sheime Mishmeres HaKodesh. One of the main questions we asked before is that there were many different parts of what the Levim did in the Mishkan. And in the Torah you find a more general expression where it speaks about what the Levim did. The lashon that it says is V'shamru Mishmartai Lavait Es Aveidas HaMishkan. Why is Rashi using this term of Sheime Mishmeres HaKodesh? Euch is nicht verstandig, but then going back to the main theme and the main chiddush here of this Rashi, that even at such a young age, they have the title of being a Sheime Mishmeres HaKodesh. Sof. In the end of the day, the question remains: Wie kemen a viele blois anrufen die Leviem mi ben Chodesh v'mayla mit Namen Sheime Mishmeres HaKodesh b'shas ze zene bepoil nit Sheime. Even if we're going to say that it's only a title, and in actuality they're not yet Sheimim, but how could he even give them this title if they're not yet doing anything? So how does this title connect to them? Is it because of the future? What's the point of this title? So seemingly we would say that the basis for this title is as euch zu lieb dem is Rashi meitik dem Shem Balamemer Rab Yehuda bar Shalom. There's something else that we see that this Tana Rab Yehuda bar Shalom said, weil ishitasai ken men anrufen euch a naye geborenem Kind al Shem Puleisav Basit. A title could be given to a baby based on what's going to happen and what he's going to do in the future. Where do we find this? The Mishnah sagt in the Darim, there's a Mishnah that says in the Darim, as a bein is sagt, keinem she'eni nena lezer Avram. I make a neder that I should not have any benefit from the descendants of Avram. Also by Yisrael, he's only forbidden to have a benefit from a Yid, but umutabu Messiah. He may derive benefit from a guy. Fragt the Yerushalmi asks on this, Ve'en Yishmael b'chlal zarish al Avram? Isn't Yishmael also the descendant of Avram? So how could he have Hana from other Goyim, and including from Yishmael? And then the Yerushalmi answers, as it states, Ki bi Yitzchak yikare l'cha zara. That only Yitzchak is the one that's called, and he has the title to be your descendant. Frekte weiter, the Yerushalmi continues and asks, Ve'ein Esav b'chlal zera Yitzchak? So even if it's only Yitzchak, but the child of Yitzchak, Esav. So the Goyim that come from Esav, is that not part of Ben Avram or Zera Avram in this neder that the person made? And here again, Omer Rav Yehuda bar Shalom. So Rav Yehuda bar Shalom says, Be Yitzchak, when it says Be Yitzchak, Be Miktzas Yitzchak, it says Ki Be Yitzchak Yikar L'Chazara. It doesn't refer to all of the children of Yitzchak. It's only part of Yitzchak. Rab Huna Omer, then Rab Huna says, Beis from Be Yitzchak means trei. The word Beis, Be Yitzchak is two. Ben, what is the two? Shu asad linchal shnei ilamis. It's the son that's going to inherit two worlds. Ha'ilam hazeh v'ha'ilam haba. The son that's going to inherit this world and the world to come. That's the pshat of Rav Huna. So now what do we see regarding Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom's opinion? L'chayre is nit muvan di asbare from Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom. In the meaning from Be Yitzchak, Be Miktzas Yitzchak. That Be Yitzchak means only part of the descendants of Yitzchak. Esav is doch fort gewen Zera Yitzchak ubefrat kodim sheyatza letar b'sra. Esav was a son of Yitzchak, especially before he went out on his evil ways. Mashen kein benegei Yishmael, which is not true regarding Yishmael, as is their pasuk alein mamshich gleichum mevayer v'gam as ben ha'ama nit Avrams. By Yishmael, we don't have such a strong question because he was only a ben ha'ama. He was a son, a child of the maid servant of Hagar. So the question regarding Esav is much stronger. Esav really was a son of Yitzchak, and really at the beginning he was born to be like a son of Yitzchak before he went out in a bad way. The pasuk is not speaking in a way that it's totally not hinted, not understood what it means to say. There should be some hint over here. It's coming to spell out which son of Yitzchak it refers to. So if so, vu liktas in pasuk as Yaakov is their miktsas unit Esav. So okay, it says be Yitzchak, so which means only one son of Yitzchak. But how do we know that miktsas refers to Yaakov and not Esav? It's two of them. It could be one or the other. It's only one of them. How do we see that it's only one? So we must say that even though in the beginning there's no way to have any advantage of one over the other, but as a yais beim elter from Yud Gimel Shana yatsa Esav l'tar b'sara. But since later, at the age of 13, Esav did go out into a bad way, which is explained in the pasuk, is shemishas le'dasai is a nit zara shel Yitzchak. So he didn't follow in the footsteps of his father. So from birth, he's not called Zarei Shel Yitzchak, based on what we could understand from what the pasuk says about his future. So here we see that we decide regarding Zera, who he is from birth, based on his future. If so, we could take the same point in the positive and say, that since the Leviim in the future are going to serve in this position of being Shemei Mishmeres HaKadosh, immediately from birth, we can give them this name and this title based on the future. This would be a pshat to explain how it's even possible to give a title at this young age that it's based on the future. Aber der Teretz ist nicht ausgehalten. This answer is incorrect. Weil since, in addition to the fact, was es legt sich nicht, als a ganze Shakel of Vitarie, soll Rashi bloß merame sein, mit herabbringen dem Shem Bala Memre. This entire point of the future, that Rashi is only hinting this, with bringing the name of the one that said this. Is besides this, Oichem Bavli steht derselbe Teretz. You have in the Gemara, it brings the exact same answer as in the Yerushalmi. Be Yitzchak, v'loi kol Yitzchak. Und dort is das a Stam Gemara. There it's a Stam Gemara, not with the name. Das heißt, what this means is, L'das ha-Bavli was halacha ke-Bavli, according to the Bavli, and we follow always the opinion of the Bavli, is das nit kein Shitte von Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom. This is not necessarily only the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom. No, this is a pirish stam l'divrei HaKail. This is a pshat the Gemara brings according to everyone. So if this is what Rashi meant, he didn't have to bring the name of Yehuda bar Rab Shalom to point this out, because in the Gemara this is according to everyone. So it doesn't seem like that Rashi is hinting to this point. Noch mehr weker, another main point there is, Rashi hat schon früher herabgebracht, der Maime kibi Yitzchak v'loi kol Yitzchak, und bringt es tam, nicht b'shem Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom. Rashi himself, when he quotes this earlier in Chumash, in Parshas Vayetze, so there Rashi brings it without saying that it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom. So Rashi is quoting it stam, like it's quoted in the Gemara. So therefore, it's not so mistaver to say that Rashi is hinting this name, Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom, to answer the question how a child, a Levi, at the age of 30 months old, could be called a Shemei Mishmeres HaKadosh with that title presently. So what is the reason? How could a child right now already be called a Shemei Mishmeres HaKadosh? Is the beer bezeh? So here the answer is as follows. Mit an Inyan von Shemei Mishmeres HaKadosh, when Rashi brings and chooses specifically this expression, that he guards Mishmeres HaKadosh, meint Rashi Shmire bepashtus. Rashi means not just in general the Aveda of the Leviim and the Mishkan, that they serve and they take charge, but he means guarding. Literally Shmire, guarding. Right? As Rashi could have chosen any other language to talk in general about what the Leviim do. Rashi chooses Shemei Mishmeres HaKadosh because he literally means this, guarding. Was the Leviim of Gehita Mishkan Shlo Yikrav Zar, the Leviim were there to guard any Zar not to come near, anyone that's not belonging there to come. The pasuk says, "V'shamru al-Leviim es mishmeres mishkan ha'edus." They are the ones that guard. They stand guard at the Mishkan. Und zu lieb dem is al derech hapshat gewendet zivui v'ha'Leviim yachanu saviv leMishkan ha'edus. It's for this reason in the pshat of the pasuk that the Leviim, where did they camp? When all the Leviim camped in the Midbar, the ones that camped around the Mishkan, closest to the Mishkan, were the Leviim. So not only the ones that stood guard at the Mishkan itself were the guards, but even the fact that they camped around the Mishkan, that itself was because they were there to live close by, to sort of separate between the Yidden and outside. They were the ones that lived there. That itself is the guard. On the far, so now we understand that therefore, Kenmen, Likore, Onru from the Leviim, Shaime Mishmeres HaKodesh, Shaime Ben Chodesh V'Mayla, they could have the title of being one that guards in the Mishkan from the age of 30 days old. Val Mitzayah Chanoya, just by being born and living right there, camping right there, they're found, they're there in their location around the Mishkan. So already in the present, they are accomplishing the Shmirah. Although to actually serve and to say that they're doing something, that you can't say. They're not doing anything, but they are already serving the purpose of being in that location, being Shemer Mishmeres HaKodesh. So that's why Rashi chooses specifically this point. Which is not the same when it comes to other Avedis, helping the Kohanim, whether it's carrying the Mishkan or singing in the Mishkan. Also because of those reasons, they're considered to be the legion of the king. Pastnit zu sagen, as die was tun, nit die Avede bepeil, sollen schon sein in Legioni als Shema Asid. We can't say that now they have this specialty because of the future, because now they're not doing anything of that. So why should they have that title at this point? Regarding the Shmireh, it's just being in that location that they separate the rest of Klal Yisrael. So therefore they could already be called Shemrei Mishmeres HaKodesh. But now, on this point, the child continues and asks the following question. We're saying the whole point here is that they specifically accounted from the age of a month and up because this is a special advantage that only they have. Aber die Meile von Ben Chodesh, was es Sheime Mishmeres HaKodesh, is nit sein Meile. But the fact that he has this title and he's guarding doesn't seem to be a Meile that he has, that's his advantage. Tututsu garnet. There's no action, there's nothing that he's doing about it. It's just by being there. It's completely just dependent on the mother. The mother gives birth to him and he's here. She gives birth. Und sie halten. She holds him. We're talking about a baby that needs to be held and fed and so on by the mother. There in that location by Machne Levi Saviv Lemishkan Eidos. But he's completely not independent in any way. So therefore, why are we giving this title to the Leviim? He's sort of still in his mother's lap and his mother together with the mother. In addition, we can ask a question. Punkt wie the Leviim. Hiten der Mishkan durch sehr Chanoya, Saviv HaMishkan Shliikrav Zom Ibnei Yisrael. If the point here is that we're not talking now about the actual guards that were standing by the Mishkan, that a Ben Chodesh V'Mayla has no connection to yet. We're talking about the fact that they live right outside, around the Mishkan, about the Chanoya, they camped over there. If so, we can similarly say, Azoi hitten alle b'nei Yisrael the Mishkan durch zeir chanoye saviv alavim v'zen in saviv leMishkan shlo yikrevu u'mesaylam. In that sense, if it's just about the camping there, so why shouldn't we say that the rest of Klal Yisrael, to some extent, are also considered to be guarding the Mishkan? They're camping around. There's layers and layers of Yidden that camp around and around and around, and they protect from any goyim to be able to penetrate and come into the Mishkan. So in that sense, shouldn't we say that everybody is serving as a guard for the Mishkan? As was ist die besondere Meile von Shevet Levi bei ihnen Sheim im Mishmeres HaKodesh, was zu lieb dem wären nur sie gezählt mit Chodesh V'Mayla. So what's the special level and advantage that the Ben Levi has by the ones that are camping there, that they are the guards of the Mishkan and they get that title presently at such a young age of being the guards of the Mishkan? Der Rebbe bringt Rashi the member von Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom as Lamed Hu Oisa Shevet Lias Nimnem in Abeten Chulu. So therefore Rashi quotes what Rabbi Yehuda bar Rab Shalom says, that this Shevet has a history of being counted from the belly. Was damit werden verämpft die beide Shailas. It answers both of these questions exactly in the precise wording of the way Rashi says this. Shevet Levi Oisa Shevet vet Nimnem min habeten. What is this expression of min habeten? Das heißt, a fille wenn de Levlad is erst min habeten. Und sein Meile ist tluya be'imai. Whatever advantages he has, his whole existence, and the fact that he's here camping in this place, it's not an independent thing. He's totally dependent on his mother. Shoin dan wird nimne basunde ametzias for sich allein. At that point, we do give him the title to be counted separately. That's what we find by Yecheved. Mina betten. Rashi is answering this question, although there's no action he's doing, no independent existence at all. But yet, even at that point, he gets this title for camping there. Zu machen klar, in order to make it clear over here, as das was Yecheved nimnis b'shivim nafesh, the fact that Yecheved was counted as part of the 70 is es nit wie es schon in ganzen Ametzias für sich. It's not as she already was independent. Nor wie sie hat noch a shaychis mit betten ima. She's counted as one of the 70 even though she's still totally dependent on her mother and she came from her mother's womb. Is Rashi medayik? So Rashi strengthens this point by precisely saying, Aleph, im knisasa bepesach Mitzrayim yoldaisa, that she was born at the entry into Mitzrayim, and Beis loisim tzoim eleshivim chasarachas. And Rashi uses this expression of 70 minus 1. What's the explanation to this? Va'abir, the explanation here is as follows. Mekanet rechnen Yechevedin wie sie is far Metzias far sich la'achrei aleida. We can't be counting Yecheved as she exists for herself. She's a soul, she's a person for herself after she's born. Zwischen the Bnei Yisrael haboim Mitzrayim, amongst those that have arrived to Mitzrayim. Weil sie ist geboren geworden erst in Knisasa bepesach Mitzrayim. She was only born as in her entry into Mitzrayim. She didn't arrive to Mitzrayim. She wasn't born before and arrived. She was born with her entry into Mitzrayim. So therefore, she can't be counted in that sense as a person for herself born from before. That's the one end. But if we're going to counter and also take into account the fact that she comes from her mother's womb, demolt mitzat ima. If we're looking at her mother that was carrying her already before, then yes, she is from those that did arrive to Mitzrayim. She was in her mother's womb before she came to Mitzrayim. Und das ist der Diok, asher yolda oisa in knisasa bepesach Mitzrayim. And therefore Rashi says that she's born at the entry, at the doorway into Mitzrayim. And the point here is as follows. It's very exact what Rashi is saying here. Wollt sie geboren geworden frier, if she was already born before, is sie shayna metzias la'atzma vi alla andere bemispa shivim nefesh. So then she's born. She's a human being that exists. And therefore she exists as a nefesh. As much as a nefesh of all the other 69 exist and are alive, if she was born before, she's a nefesh just like everybody else before. And therefore Rashi would not be able to make this point relevant for us, nimnem in betten, that she's not independent and she's still in her mother's womb, which is the main point that Rashi is trying to prove over here regarding the Levi camping in that place, being completely in her mother's hand, dependent on the mother. So if she was born before, so in that context of nefesh, she's completely independent. So what kind of a connection is there to our point? On the other hand, Volzi geboren geworden später. If Yecheved was born at a later point, in other words, after she came into Mitzrayim, how could we counter from those 70 that arrived to Mitzrayim? Weil kolzman sie is bebetten ima, is sie nit kemetzias for sich, no yerech ima. As long as she's in her mother's womb, she's not an entity for itself. The expression that it says is, it's like the thigh of the mother. It's like a part of the mother's body. So at that point, she can't be counted separately at all. She's born at the doorway, at the entry of Mitzrayim. Was in Yonei Shel Pesach is, what's a doorway? Zum Bechaber sein dem Chutz le'ir mit dem Stadt. The doorway is that opening that connects the outside of the city to the inside of the city. Welt nit staref ihr sein bebetten immer far de knisse mit leidasa im knisasa bepesach Mitzrayim. So here, the fact that she's born right there in the doorway, so the doorway serves that opening from outside. So now I say the fact that she was in her mother's womb before, it's considered as if she was born before. She's in the doorway here, which is still connected to the outside. And she's born right there coming into Mitzrayim, so therefore I can say, she's counted separately, being that she was already in her mother's womb before, she's counted part of those that arrived to Mitzrayim. So therefore here I see the point that I'm counting a nefesh as an independent nefesh, yet it's based on the fact that she was in her mother's womb before. And that's the proof to what we're saying here, that the Leviim can be counted and have that title of Shomer Mishmeres HaKodesh, even though the moment they are born, they're just camping there in their mother's hands, in their mother's arms, feeding them, taking care of them. Und, das ist der Diok, this is also the precise wording of Rashi, that it's 70 minus 1. Euch far ladies Yechevet is given Shivim Nafesh. Even before Yechevet is born, there are 70 souls. Varom, sie ist schon given Nigmara legamri bebet nima. She was already completely developed and ready to be born in her mother's womb. She's there. Rashi wants to make the point, she was there, part of her mother, but it was chaser, it was lacking. As then in Dodi Shivim, we have the 70, that last one is not actually born. She didn't come out into the world yet. And then she's born right there at the doorway, which is still connected to the outside. That's where she's born, and she completes the number. Durch ihr Leida ist zugekommen as Shleimus in die Shivim. She completes that number. She was already really there, but not fully there. And therefore now that she's born right there at the doorway, which is still connected to the outside, she completes the number which was lacking. As Olverin, Shivim, on Chaser, Shleimim, she can become full 70 without lacking anything. And therefore Rashi brings this exact expression of Shivim, Chaser Achas. Because Rashi is trying to make the point that the proof for the Levium is for Yechevet being counted as being part of her mother. And therefore over here as well, the Levium could be counted as Shomer Mishmeres HaKodesh, even though the child is totally independent on the mother. So we have all the questions that the Rebbe asked here on these Rashis completely answered. And the point here is that the Levium at this point are counted and they can get the title of Shomer Mishmeres HaKodesh in the present sense, not because of the actual job that they're doing, but because of the position that they're in, camping around the Yidden or around the Mishkan at that point, and therefore they can then receive this title even though they're totally dependent on their mother. As the Rebbe beautifully explained all the details over here. Von Yena Shal Teire Bepirish Rashi. Now the Rebbe brings us what we can see al Pichsidis from this Rashi. From Pasik Anoichi Shlume Amune Yisrael. The Pasik where it speaks about, it says in the Pasik in Shmuel, that I will take care of the welfare of all Yidden. Is Mavur in Chassidus, so it says in Chassidus, Miyusadef in Zoyar, based on what it says in Zoyar, as das gate of Sphiris HaMalchus. This refers to the Sphira of Malchus. Why is Malchus referred to Shlume Amune Yisrael? Shemashlemes l'chol Sphira u'Sphira. The Sphira of Malchus completes every single Sphira. Every single one of the 10 Sphiras is completed by Malchus. What the Pirish in them is, the meaning of the fact that Malchus completes all the Sphiras, nit nor as Malchus is mashlim, the mispar von Esesphiris. It doesn't only mean simply in the sense that it completes the number. Was das is nit ken inyan miyuchad in Sphiris ha-Malchus, that's not unique about Malchus. Yet the Sphira is doch mashlim the mispar Sphiris. Each one of the Sphiris completes the number. Was bespar an Eser, the number is 10. So you always need each one of them to bring that number. What does this mean? Nor as in Sugob Tzi'ir Zayin, eine von the Esesphiris, Malchus, in addition to being one of the 10, Peilt Malchus a Shleimus in jeder von alle Sphiris. So Malchus brings actually a higher level of completion to all the other Sphiris. And what does this mean? Von dem is move on benegedem Pirish Chazal of Hanoichi Shlume Amuni Yisrael. As das geht of Serach Bas Osher. We can understand this based on what Chazal tell us in the Medrash, that this refers to Serach Bas Osher She'omra. She said, according to one opinion, Ani she'eshlamti minyan shel Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. I'm the one that completed the number of Yidden that came down to Mitzrayim. As der Shlamti is oich von Loshen Shleimus. The word Shlamti doesn't just mean that she was that final number, but also that she brings a Shleimus to all Yidden. Ubefrat api amavur in Eira Teire as Serach Bas Osher yeshloim Ashua Malchus. In Eira Teire, the Tzemach Tzedek says that Serach Bas Osher is the level of Malchus. So from them is Oich Muvah Menegea, Loshen Rashi, as Yechevet, Hishlima Esaminyan. When it says here, Rashi says that Yechevet is the one that completes the number, similar to what it says about Malchus and about Serach Bas Osher, as das is der Inyan von Shleimus and the Minyan von Kol B'nai Yisrael. This refers to the Shleimus that she's mashlim, the number of all Yidden, similar to what it says by Serach Bas Osher. And this is connected to Malchus, as the Rebbe will explain here. Das was Malchus, Peilt Shleimus and alle Sphiris. The fact that the Sphira of Malchus brings about the shleimos and all of the other spheres. Is das weil durch Malchus vet nimshach der gilui euchen olam is biyah. Through Malchus, that's the funnel, the channel, to bring down all revelations that exist in Atzilus into the lower worlds. Malchus is the kingdom, or Malchus is usually referred to as Dibur, communication, to communicate and bring down the revelations of Atzilus into the lower worlds. But das is der Iker HaKavana Shalamatzel. That was the main purpose of Atzilus being brought into existence. The Eibishter's purpose was to take from there and bring it further down into Biyah. So since the sphere of Malchus comes down and is invested to bring the energy of the Eibishter into Biyah, since Malchus is that level which is related to and limited and defined by the lower worlds, so therefore on its own, it doesn't have the koyach to draw and bring that revelation from a higher place. Just like the expression the Gemara says, a prisoner cannot free himself, so too if Malchus is limited by the reality of the lower worlds, if that's the world of Biyah, it's sort of outside already, relating to that place, so how can it draw from the Meitzel, from a higher place? Nor, es ist mitzadem, was in Sphiris Malchus, is mehr der Eur von Sphiris, was ist ein Hecher von der Slapshus von Sphiris Malchus. So we must say that in Malchus there's a revelation of what's higher. There's a higher source of revelation that comes into Malchus, and therefore Malchus serves as this communicating force to bring from that higher place down into Biyah. Und das ist der Tam Pnimi, and this explains now a deeper understanding here, was Yechevet hat Maschten given the minion in dem Eufen, was Leidosas given im Knisasa bepesach Mitzrayim. That she's the one that completes the number of Yidden when they came to Mitzrayim, and her birth is when she enters into Mitzrayim. And so there's 2 points over here. Bichdei zu peilen, die Shleimus ha-minyan b'nei Yisrael, in order to be able to complete Klal Yisrael, is das Davke durch dem, was Leidosa is im Knisasa. She enters, she's inside Mitzrayim. Bedugmas the Yiridu for Malchus Libiyah. Malchus is part of the lower worlds. Malchus relates and is there in part of that reality. So too Yechevet is considered to be born in Mitzrayim. That's on one hand. Aber Lidach on the other hand, all of the days of her pregnancy was before she entered Mitzrayim. Und dafki mitzadem ken sie herangehen in den Minyan kanal sifit gimel b'dirk im knisasa b'pesach Mitzrayim. It's only because she was already in her mother's womb before, and she's born at the doorway, which is related to outside, that we count also the fact that she was in her mother's womb before. So the fact that she existed before is also significant. Weil der Koyach zu herabgehen peile man inje von Geule in Mitzrayim, in order to be able to be the source of the one that will bring about the redemption, to go out of Mitzrayim, she's the one that brought life to the children when Pare made the Gzeira that she should kill them, nennt sich von einer Art, was ist Michutz und Hecher von Mitzrayim Gvulim. She has to be coming from a place that's from higher, that's from before Mitzrayim. And her pregnancy and her birth was right there at the entrance, which is related to outside, above Mitzrayim. So there's sort of 2 opposite points here. To bring the Geula, you have to bring it down to the place of where the Golus is. She has to be part of Mitzrayim itself. But yet she has to draw from a source and from a place which is before and outside and higher than Mitzrayim. Das is Eich Merumiz, in dem Shem Bala Memre, this idea is also hinted in the name of the one that says this. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shalom. Yehuda, what does the word Yehuda refer to? Hapa Moide, to thank Hashem, or also Haidot, to submit yourself, to completely annul yourself to Hashem, which is what Sphiris HaMalchus is about, where there's no understanding, there's no reasoning, but it's absolute bittul to Hashem's kingdom. Shalom, what does the word Shalom refer to? Gate of Teire. Shalom refers to Teire, which Chazal say, Nitnolas is Shalom Bailam. Teire is here to bring peace into the world. On Sphiris HaTeferes, it's related to the Sphira of Teferes, which is the middle of the Sphiris, related to Teire. Rabbi Yehuda Berab Shalom, so both of these names together, is the Chibur from Malchus and Teferes. It's combining together Malchus, which is Kabbalah Soil, accepting the yoke of heaven and totally submitting yourself to Hashem, and also Torah, the study of Torah, where a person learns and understands Torah. So the combination of the two together, on one hand, the absolute bittul, but yet at the same time also the learning and understanding with Torah and the person himself understanding. And in Torah Atzma, the Chibur, in Torah itself, what this refers to is the connection from Gal Yedid Torah, Malchus,
connecting the external and the revealed part of Torah, which is connected to Malchus, the lowest of the spheres, that comes down and relates to the world here below. With Pnimiyas HaTorah, with the higher part of Torah, which is Teferes, the deeper secrets of Torah. The less Taman Leikushya Chulav Lemachleikis, the deeper parts of Torah where there are no questions and there are no arguments. Was durch dem Chibur is Ka'asi Ma Da Malka Meshiche Ubekarev Mamish. And it's through combining these two together. On one hand, being in a lower place and having the absolute Kabbalah Sa Malchus Shamayim, connecting that to learning Torah, which draws from a higher place. We bring these two together, and this will bring the coming of Mashiach Bekarev Mamish.